Italian Wine Podcast. Chin Chin with Italian wine people.
Hello, this is the Italian Wine Podcast with me, Monty, Waldin. My guest today is Elena Pozzolini from Tenuta Sette Cieli in the Bolgheri area of Tuscany, correct?
Yes, correct.
Hi, Elena. So just tell us a little bit about the estate. Where is it? Because it seems to have vineyards in two different places, and a little bit of the history of the estate.
Yes, so the property has been buy from a family from North Italy, from Como, from Famiglia Ratti. Erika Ratti, she fell in love for this place, which is on the top of a hill in front of the historical vineyard Sassicaia. So it's located in Monteverdi Marittimo because the administrative boundary is Monteverdi and not Bolgheri, but we are very close to Bolgheri. So, as I told you before, very close to the historical vineyard Sassicaia. So, the property born up there at 400 meters in a very rocky soil, but because it was tough to make people understand our place, we decided to buy a property in Bolgheri. So from 2018, we bought this property on the bottom of the hill where Sette Cieli is located. So different condition, different soil, different altitude, but still very interesting place to grow vines.
What are the differences between the two areas that you have?
So, just to give you an idea, so Bolgheri, as you know, is a very small DOC, and is almost 1,200 hectares, and is the only area where you find Bordeaux varietals. And the kind of soil that you can find in this area, obviously, I'm talking very generic because every single vineyard has its own variability. But from a Bolgheri Street, which is the main street where all the famous winery are located, like Ornellaia, for example, below the street, going closer to the ocean, you find more sandy soil. From that street until the bottom of the hill, where we have the property that we bought, is a mix between sand and clay and some limestone. And on the top of the hill, like Sette Cieli, is a very high percentage of clay and lots of stone. Just to give you an idea, the historic vineyard Sassicaia is at 380 meters and has been called Sassicaia because while they were preparing the vineyard, they found a Sassicaia. Sasso means stones, so they found so many stones. That's the same profile that we have in Sette Cieli. So first of all, the difference is the kind of soil. Then the altitude, okay, because the altitude, the elevation, fantastic temperature change between night and day. So the time of ripeness, even if we are talking about the same varietals, up to the hill is slower. And that's preserve aromas, preserve acidity. And you face with the final finding of the skin usually very late when the weather is cooler, and plus the presence of the sea obviously helps having a constant breeze. We are in Sette Cieli up to the hill. We are at almost 10 kilometers, and so you can feel the breeze constantly, and it helps a lot, especially because we are organic, so helps a lot to get dry leaves and grapes.
So how long does your harvest normally take from start to finish then?
So we start down in Bolgheri with Merlot usually beginning of September. And we finish up with the Cabernet Sauvignon, sometimes Cabernet Franc, mid-October.
You've worked abroad a lot, like notably in Argentina, in California. You're very, very well traveled. What did you learn on your travels that has helped you change things at Sette Cieli?
To be honest, what I learned, first of all, is a different approach to face the winemaking. because I found the new world more open-minded and characterized by experimentation. I remember when I was after university, when before I left, I did some experience in Tuscany, and it was very common and usual to find a repeatable way to work. They used to say, "Yeah, we always work like this, and everything was good, so why I have to change?" And so I learned from my experience around the world a different attitude. Obviously, every single experience taught me something. But right now, the seasons are so inconstant that it's hard to apply what you learned the year before, because it can happen that from a vintage to another, your way to work can be completely the opposite. Just to give you an example, 2000 vintage 2014 and 2015 seems to be in two worlds completely different.
14 and 15, why were they so different in a couple of words?
Yeah, a couple of words. 2014 was a very cold season and lots of rain. In July, just to give you an idea, every 2 days was raining. 2015, it was very hot. So in August, even up to the hill, we reach 40 degrees Celsius, which is unusual and amazing. And what was worst was the average temperature was always around 32. For 15 days was like this in August. So it was very, very hot. And from 2015 on, I can say that every season are getting hotter. 2017 was completely dry, hot but dry, lots of dry. So every year is a new story.
What do you do with your vineyard teams? What have you changed in the vineyard because of climate change? For example, pruning or soveshi, cover crops?
Yeah, so what we do is tough because you never know what you are going to have, it's a very unpredictable sometimes because you don't know how could be the season. But for sure, what we are doing right now is we don't remove leaves as we used to do. And if we have to do something like this, we do with a very big crew, because timing is the magic word to do quality sometimes, timing and the sensibility to do the right things in the right moment. So regarding Sovesso, we don't work with recipe, okay? And it's impossible to work with recipe. So what for us makes the difference is to give to the vines and to the single parcel what they need. You see, sometimes stupid, but it's not like this. It's not, you can, watching the vines, you can see what they need. So what we do right now is even for also special for manure, for feeding, for everything. So we try to give to give them what they need, and day by day we decided how is the season. We try to give what they need and what is the best things to do in the right moment.
Do you sow things like cereals like orzo, barley, or clovers, trifolio, things like that for cover crops?
Yeah, for cover crops we use senape, quadrifoglio, trifoglio incarnato. So it's a mix of seeds. For example, for Malbec, we have Malbec. And Malbec, I used to work in Argentina, so I was expecting a different Malbec. We have a condition completely different, and the Malbec in our area suffer the humidity and the rains, and the skin shows very thin. So we planted barley, because barley goes in competition, suck water, goes in competition with the vines. So we try to find a natural way to obtain the best result. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, but not because there are many factors that you can control everything, obviously, but our goal obviously is to reach this.
Why do you sow trifolio, clover, as a cover crop, come sovescio? Why do you use that?
Well, we use that because when it's important for the nitrogen and for the to fix nitrogen during some phase of growing of the vines. So it depends. Even sometimes how much we produce from the vines, and we try to give them what they used to absorb the nutrients the year before. Okay, so every year can be different, and it's the part funny and interesting of this job, because you never do the same things. You try to adapt a different condition.
I mean, in terms of cover crops, this will be the last one on cover crops, but it's a very important thing, particularly where you are. Obviously, with climate change, getting organic matter into the soil to act like a sponge when it does rain, is that important for you? And what do you sow for that? What kind of crops do you sow for that, cover crops?
Okay, so for Sostanza Organica, so sometimes we use manure if we need that the Sostanza Organica is the organic part is checking to the analysis of the soil. If we see that the level is quite low, we only use ripe manure, because it's important that it's ripe. Otherwise, what you will have is seeds from the animals that they used to eat, and is not what we want. So we usually take a very ripe manure, and but we don't do every year, because sometimes it can be a problem, because we force too much the production and the vigorousness of the vines, and we don't want this. We want everything's well balanced. So some years we do only in the parts that we saw that they suffer a little bit, and the shoots they didn't grow very strong as the other. So every year is different. We after harvest we check all the parcel and we decide what to do.
So just for everybody, when Elena says ripe manure, what she means is manure that has been aged and isn't completely fresh, because if it's completely fresh, it will actually damage the vines. Okay, so you've had a very varied career. You've worked in, I think you said, in Argentina and the United States. What did you learn from those experiences that have helped you when you came back to Tuscany?
Yeah, so obviously, when I was in Argentina, I did 2 harvests there, and 1 in Australia and 2 in California. So the climate was completely different respect to here. Argentina is a desert, so if you don't irrigate, you need the water, to have life, because sometimes it's tough to grow the vineyard at that condition. And so I faced to very extreme climate, and consequently the result of the mast and the vines were with very high alcohol and low acidity. So I learned how to treat mast and vine in this condition. Even as I told you before, I learned a different approach to face with the winemaking, because they don't have our history. So when I left from Tuscany, I was a little bit too self-confident to know already everything, because I believe that the new world couldn't teach me nothing, because I was coming from Tuscany. And then I realized that they were more open-minded, and they wanted to arrive. They don't have our same history, but they wanted to do better, and they were usually trying to do experimentation. I remember that one of my ex-boss, they used to say, if you never know, you will never, if you never try, you will never know, if you're doing right or wrong. So I learned mainly, this approach. And obviously that then my approach when I arrived came back in Tuscany, it was more to be sensitive in the vineyard. I found that vineyard is really important. I always say that I cannot be a winemaker without being the vineyard, because it's not just a phrase, but the wine you first do in the vineyard. And so it's very important to give, to the vineyard what they need, watching them. It seems simple, but if you watch the vineyard, you can know what is the best things to do. And it's the same in the cellar. Tasting the wine, especially while you're doing, fermentation, you can understand what is the best things to do.
So I've got a question about entomology. You really like entomology, and you've done a lot of research on that, I know, through your career. Can you tell me what entomology is and why you're so fascinated by it?
After my degree graduation, I specialized in vineyard disease, especially in the grapevine moth, which is Tignoletta della Vite, and in the mating disruption, which is fusione sessuale. So I spent several years around vineyard, and that period helped me a lot to understand better the dynamic of some disease. And I understood not only the bad effect of this moth, but I understood even how many insects are useful, and we call insetti utili, so useful for viticulture or for an ecosystem, because that's why I believe a lot in the organic method, because there is the surrounding environment consists in an ecosystem that if you are organic, you cannot alter, and it's very important because at the end you find a balance between good things and bad things. And so I understood from entomologists that seriously is a fascinating world, and many different factors that at the end can bring a balanced ecosystem.
You're organic in the vineyard. How about the winemaking? How easy is it to make wines in the Bolgheri area? We think of it as a hot area with oaky wines. What's your approach?
Sette Cieli, so my approach to for winemaking is I define very simple, because there are no rules, there are no recipe. I can start with before the harvest time. I usually fight with my colleague because they always be around content of sugar, level of sugar, acidity, pH, and I usually go through the tasting of the berries. It's something that I learned in Australia, and it was funny because I learned that. Tasting berries, you really can understand how could be your wine. Obviously, when you taste a glass of wine, you have the alcohol, the acidity, you have the tannins. But if you taste you tune a berry, you don't have the alcohol, but you have the water, the sugar, the tannin touching the skin, the acidity, and so you can understand and feel the balance. So I started with this approach. So lots of tasting of berries, and that's when you feel that everything is well balanced in your mouth, is the right time of picking. Not numbers is just the numbers, but all the rest is what happened in a tank during the fermentation. So even in the cellar it's quite simple. So every day there are no rules about how many punch down or pump over or oxygen. Obviously we are very careful about to feed in the right way the yeast. We use indigenous yeast, and we did some trial with the commercial yeast, but we don't want to standardize our production with something commercial. We feel that obviously the differences between commercial yeast and indigenous are minimal, but there are. And you can feel it when you compare it. So we want to preserve this. Sette Cieli is surrounded by forest. There are no producer around us, and so we don't have any influence. So we want to preserve this. A wine must talk about obviously a grape, but must talk about a place, and then about a vintage, because it's impossible to do the same wine every year. Seasons are completely changed, and every year are so different and constant. So it's important that the wine speak about a vintage. So the other reason that we don't work with the commercial yeast is because most of all the times the commercial yeast makes the fermentation, the cinetic very fast, and we don't want to make us as shorter the time of maturation. We are making a red wine, so it's a very important instruction, especially in the first phase, because we don't have the alcohol at the beginning, and alcohol can be a strong and sometimes too strong extractor. So we want to control the extraction. And then everything is just tasting. So have the sensibility to to do the right thing in the right moment. And as I told you before, every year is completely different. So you face with different wine. In the last 5 years, I can say that the season are getting hotter and hotter. And so sometimes it's very important, it's common to find a higher percentage of alcohol. So it's important that you have tannins and acidity that can balance the hotness of the alcohol. We are lucky because the location and the kind of soil and the climate, the microclimate that we have in Sette Cieli helps a lot, especially to preserve the acidity and the aromas. So the presence of the sea, because we are 10 kilometers away from the sea, helps to have a constant breeze, and the elevation creates a fantastic temperature change between night and day, and that's good for to don't lose the acidity. Acidity means that when the wines are young, they're very close and tight. In fact, we release the wines later respect all the other winery of the area. But then, acidity gives life to the wine. And so we want this from our wine. We want the elegance, we want the freshness. So I'm not saying that our place is better than the others. I'm just talking about a specific place. And I'm fascinated about this. I'm fascinated when the wine you can recognize and you can feel where it comes from.
If you anybody wants to look at the estate's website, there's some fantastic photography there that really gives you an idea of how sort of isolated this particular estate is. Really, really good photography and a very good website. So just let's talk about the individual wines, your red wine. So tell us about Yantra. What is that made from?
So Yantra is a wine a blend of Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot, 60-40. And I don't like to call entry-level wine because we don't treat as entry-level wine. So there is no specific vineyard for Yantra. So the Merlot and the Cabernet that we like less goes in Yantra, but we don't produce one grape more respect the other. So we treat all the vineyard at the same level, same quality, and then it's just a choice. What we like less goes in Yantra, what we like more goes in Indico. And because we parcel a lot, even every single terraces that you can see from the website, we parcel seaside, middle part, bush side, just because tasting the berry, you can feel the differences. And so we put Yantra in old barrel just to keep separately this parcel. Then we have a Noi Quattro, which is not anymore on the top of the hill, but is inside the Bolgheri DOC, and is a blend of four varieties: Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Petit Verdot, and Cabernet Franc, aged in barrels, French barrels, for almost 15 months, and the percentage of new oak can be from 40 to 50% maximum. Then we have Indico. Indico, again, we are on the top of the hill, and is a blend of Malbec, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Merlot. Usually one third, one third, and one third. We do an aging of barrels for almost 18 months. I say almost because sometimes it can be 18, sometimes 19, sometimes 15. So we taste and we decide when remove the wine from barrels. But we keep every single parcel separately, and then we blend it before bottling. And Scipio, the last one but not the least one, is a Cabernet Franc 100%. So Cabernet Franc is a very sensitive variety, so need, especially in the final part of the ripening, a climate not extremely hot and not extremely cold. And only in that condition we can get the perfect ripeness of the skin. Otherwise, what we extract is too green herbaceous aroma, which is not typical of Cabernet Franc, but you can feel it when it's a little bit unripe. So in the last year, we can make it every year, but since before 2013, it was tough to make it every year. So we usually make only in the best vintages.
Just explain who, if it's the Scipio that I'm thinking of that occurs in the Italian canto, the Italian national anthem, is that the same Scipio?
Sì, Scipione l'Africano, yes. It was a famous Roman military general and statesman who defeat Hannibal at the final battle of the Second Punic War. Yes, it's Scipione l'Africano.
I'm impressed that you've got all that to memory.
Ambrogio, the owner, he was a fanatic of history, and that's why he decided to choose this name. His mother was already passed away, so he had to choose a name, and so in that period he was studying battles, and so was very fascinated about this general Roman, and so that's why he called Scipio. Indaco, which is my favorite, is Indaco means blue indigo, and probably from the website you can see, but is the main color you can see from the property during the sunset. So it's quite beautiful because all around become blue indigo. So it's amazing. That's why Sette Cieli, it seems to, obviously you are on the top of the hill, but it seems to be many layers, so different blue. It seems to be at seven, seven skies, seven heaven.
Okay. So, final question: what are your main markets for your wines?
Yeah, so in Italy, our distributor is Pellegrini Vini, but we export our wine, for example, in Switzerland with Borlac. In England, Swig is our importer. In Belgium, at Bibendum, and Wilson Daniel in USA, which is quite big. And then we have a small distributors in Japan or in other small country. And but you can find even our wine online in the shop of our website.
This is the final question, I promise you. Is it, if I got this right, that some of your vineyards are planted at 9,300 vines per hectare?
Yes.
Who had that idea, and why such a high vine density? That's like double normal for Tuscany.
I believe so. Who planted the vineyard was Kurtats from Gruppo Masura. So to be honest, the new plantation, because the 9,300 plants per hectare means 1.8 meters between the rows and 60 centimeters between vines, which is for me too narrow. So the new plantation, I put the vines at 80 centimeters because you can control and manage better the development and the trimming. So 60 centimeters, I had to change the system of pruning because when I arrived, we had a double cordon spur, which is crazy. And so I turn here they arrive in one cordon spur, then in alberello, until arrive just every year, until arrive to Guyot with double spur, just because it was important to don't lose this space from the testa di salice, from the head of the vine, So having two spur, I'm able every year to find a new cane for the Guyot. Yeah, so in front of a vine, I can explain better. My computer is a little bit tough, but so I can say that 60 centimeters is a little bit too narrow. So, but the idea of high density is just because when you watch a tree, what you see outside, you find underground of roots. Okay, so if you put one vine next to the other, the roots they start to fight the space, and so it's a natural way to control the development of the shoots. I believe that there is always a right measure of everything. We have a lot of clay, and so sometimes with narrow rows, it can be dangerous, and you can make a lot of damage because, especially when you do sprays, you can. Sleep with the boat and make damage. That's why we decided to keep two spur to always have a chance for the next year.
I mean, it's quite brave of you to do that, to make that change. I mean, that's it's a big change for the vines.
I'm not sure that is the right answer because at the end you have too many buts. Okay, so for example, 2 years ago, we start to cutting the buds because of what happened that at the end you absorb too many energy from the vines. So obviously in March you do the first selection of the little green shoot, but still you absorb some energy. So we decided to cut part of the buds, especially the first three that you don't use because they are too narrow and too attached on each other. So you can produce from that. It doesn't make sense, But sometimes when you arrive at that period, time is the point. So you don't have the time to do this. So we did an experimental last year with three. It's called palmetta. I don't know in English. It's palmetta. It's like a three, like an alberello, but in spalliera.
Okay, so it's a bush vine that's trained like a cane prune vine.
So in this way, you control the number of buds, and you still use the space that you have. So every year, is a bet, and you need to do some experimental. Sometimes it's the right choice, sometimes not. But it's the funny part of this job is even this because you never get bored. Sometimes too stressed, but I love my job.
Yeah, you seem pretty relaxed. Just one final question in terms of the changes that you made in the vineyard. What changes did you see in nel mosto, in the juice when you were fermenting the wines? Were the numbers different in terms of pH, acidity, and sugar levels?
So not in pH and acidity because it's something that we still not understand how can be possible that we have so high acidity. We try to produce more, respect to produce less, but acidity and pH is something that sometimes it's really high and aggressive. Just to give you an idea, 2015 that I told you before was very hot in August, and the first time in Sette Cieli we reached 15 degrees of alcohol, which is first time in our life. Even that, I was unable to understand the tannins during the final part of the fermentation due to the level of high acidity. So the first time in my life that I had to count how many days the mast was in maturation because it was impossible to feel tannins for how strong was the acidity. So for acidity and pH is a different story, but changing the kind of pruning and so numbers of bud and cluster, obviously you have a different result in the kind of ripening and especially in the tannins. So you have more fining tannins and more at the end more elegant, because you don't have aggressive or green tannins. So this is the main difference that I found. And obviously, when you can manage in more space and in a better way the shoots and all the plant, you have a better irradiation from the sun. And you have a better exposure. You have the wind and everything can go through better. And so at the end helps a lot. So for the final ripening, for the ripe healthiness of the grapes.
Brilliant. Okay. Very, very interesting. And, it's very brave of you to make that change, but it seems to have paid off. Well done you for doing that and for having the bravery to do that and for changing the wines as well. So I just want to say thanks to my guest today, Elena Pozzolini of Tenuta Sette Cieli in the Tuscan coast. It's been fascinating to talk to you, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for talking with me, and I hope to see you in Sette Cieli.
Yeah, I'm in Montalcino, so I'm not too far away from you. So I'll come and see you. Okay.
Okay, I can't wait.
All right. Take care, Elena. Ciao.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Listen to the Italian Wine Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We're on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Himalaya FM, and more. Don't forget to subscribe and rate the show. If you enjoy listening, please consider donating through ItalianWinePodcast.com. Any amount helps cover equipment, production, and publication costs. Until next time, chin chin.